Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Hakumei in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 22, Part 2, Ties. Naruto watched without too much interest as the match between Shikamaru and Kabuto drew to a close. While Kabuto seemed like he could have easily won, he just threw the match. Shikamaru seemed to have noticed this too, because when Kabuto was knocked unconscious, Shikamaru gave him a very strange look. Kabuto was carried off by medics, and Shikamaru walked off to join Ino, still looking a little confused. Truthfully, Kabuto confused Naruto as well. Why would he have gone through all the effort just to throw the match? It just didn't make sense unless he was working for someone. Naruto had a feeling that he didn't know about Hakumei, but then again, he had just been there to give Team Kekkai Genkai information about their opponents and kind of warn them to get out of the tournament. It seemed that Kabuto had done whatever it was that he had wanted to do, so he had gotten out of the whole thing quickly. Naruto looked over at Neji, Hinata and Gaara. All three of them had to win, and they had to do it in a way that didn't get people to recognize them. The ones with the biggest problems were Gaara and Neji. Both of their techniques were recognizable. Gaara couldn't even turn off his power. No matter what he did, the sand would rise up to protect him. Also, because of the fear that the villagers of Suna had for him, Gaara would be easier to recognize than Naruto, who was basically just ignored, would be. Gaara had family here, and they would have had to have seen him at least a little. Gaara had once mentioned that he lived away from his real family with his uncle. Naruto had to admit he thought that that was one of the dumbest plans that he had heard of. It was kind of like begging Gaara to become a homicidal maniac. Then again, that might have been what Gaara's father had wanted anyways. Hinata would have the easiest time of all of them. She could activate the Tenshi Byakugan beneath the Genjutsu. That made her able to use it, but she still couldn't use the Juken. The Hyuga family technique was just too obvious. Hinata had her own tricks though, so she would probably be fine. Neji might have some problems. The Byakugan couldn't be activated, and most of his techniques used it. They really hadn't planned for a situation like this. All of Naruto's dreams of invading Konoha had involved an attack and marching down the main street in full Hakumei uniform. Although deception and stealth were some of the things drilled into them mercilessly, this wasn't something that anyone had anticipated. Naruto only hoped that that didn't come back to haunt him. He kept up a bored face as he watched the computer sort through names of the remaining people. Naruto noticed as Haku began to back away and slip out. Apparently, he was going to do a little snooping. The least that he could do was pretend that he wasn't noticing. Finally, the pinging sound reached Naruto's ears and he looked up to see the new fighters' names. Haru vs. Tenten. Naruto blinked at the pairing and looked over at Neji, who was looking completely unconcerned. Neji slowly straightened himself from his position of leaning around the rail and sauntered downstairs into the area. Tenten stiffened when her name went up and as she walked down quickly, looking nervous. She was walking stiffly, looking over at Neji a few times and biting her lip. Naruto wondered just why she looked so nervous. Both faced one another in the arena as hate looked between them. He coughed a little and began the usual pre-fight speech. Neji had his arms crossed and looked rather uninterested in the entire thing, but Tenten was looking like she wanted to just attack with everything that she had and to be done with the whole thing. Begin. Hate called. Tenten wasted no time. She grabbed a large scroll, bit her finger and pressed it against the scroll. Immediately, a shower of different weapons soared towards Neji. He didn't look like he would have time to dodge, but as they started to land, they caused dust to rise, blocking everyone's vision. Naruto knew just what was going to happen. If there was a chance for Neji to take advantage of things, he would. Tenten smirked, looking like she was sure of victory. The smoke cleared, showing Neji standing untouched, surrounded by weapons. I assume you're just getting warmed up, he said, because if that's the best you can do, I'll win easily. Tenten's eyes narrowed angrily. I'll crush you, Kusunin. You continually mention my village, Neji commented. I wonder if it's because you're not really a Konohan in any ways. With a scream of rage, Tenten took out 2 scrolls and preformed a series of seals. Sashoryuha! She cried, jumping into the air and opening the scrolls. An even greater shower of weapons began to fall, Raining down towards Niji, Naruto was able to see him dodge the first two, and then the dust was too much for him to see anything, but Naruto knew that he had employed the Hakusho Kaiten, Niji's all-time favorite move. That also kicked up more dust, so it would be almost impossible to see what he was doing. It looked to Naruto like Niji was going to win this battle by psyching Tenten out or something. Niji was always really good at that. The dust cleared again, and Tenten hit the ground. This time, she looked like she was a little more prepared. Niji was surrounded by the weapons again, but he was unharmed. Tenten stretched out her hands and the weapons began to shudder a little. Niji didn't waste time. He dashed forwards, kunai in hand, and attacked Tenten. She jumped back, narrowly avoiding the swipe of the kunai, but the weapons stopped moving. "You," Tenten whispered, "you figured out the wires after only seeing them twitch. I figured that you were smart enough to know that there was a good chance that the second attack would fail like the first one, therefore, you would have taken an extra measure," Niji said, dashing forwards again. "I'm not going to allow you to perform another attack like that. I won't lose to a foreign nin," Tenten cried, a staff appearing in her hands. She charged at Niji, who dodged easily, grabbed hold of the staff and managed to force it from her. Tenten wasn't the only one who had learned to use weapons. All of Hakumei knew how to use a weapon at least somewhat well. "I wonder why you're so worried about the fact that I come from Kusa," Niji said conversationally as he whirled the staff towards her. "Could it be because you're not from Konoha?" Tenten growled a little. "It's none of your business. It must have been difficult going to school after the Sandame's assassination. People in Konoha don't seem to approve of taking in foreigners as much as they used to," Niji continued. "So you thought that by defeating me, a ninja from another village, you could prove that you were truly a Konoha nin?" "Shut up!" Tenten screamed, taking out a scroll and making a mace appear from it. She jumped to attack, hitting the staff that Niji had stolen as he blocked. Niji just looked slightly amused. He was calmly and systematically attacking her psychologically. This was how he was going to make up for not having the Byakugan to help him. Niji had long ago noticed how Naruto would talk to people when he fought. Usually it just distracted them, but every so often, he would hit a nerve. Like that time when Naruto had somehow managed to get Gaara to talk about his family while they were sparring. Niji had realized that this was a wonderful way to win a fight, and had started to use it himself. So far, it had been very effective. Naruto had to admit that Niji was very good at what he was doing, although it wasn't very nice. Tenten was wearing down. "It's funny, you're wearing the Konoha symbol on your head yet you don't feel like a leaf nin," Niji said. "You know something else." At that point, Niji lunged forward, and struck with the staff, forcing Tenten back. For a moment they were close, and Niji whispered something that Naruto couldn't hear. Tenten froze and stared at Niji for a split second. Niji sent a kick that Tenten didn't seem to notice. The kick hit her straight on and she crashed against the wall, and didn't move. Tenten is unable to continue, Hayate said. "The winner is Haru." Niji smirked up at the spectators and walked up the stairs, ignoring as the medics rushed Tenten off. Niji resumed his place, leaning against the wall and looking down into the arena. "I feel so much better now," Niji smirked. "What did you say to her?" Naruto asked. "That's for me to know and you to wonder about," Niji smirked. "Maybe I'll tell you at some later time." That meant that when they were alone, Niji would explain everything. Naruto was rather interested. Niji seemed to be trying to do something with Tenten, but Naruto couldn't really tell what it was. The plan, since it was Niji, was going to be intricate and detailed, and Naruto was kind of looking forward to seeing what happened. Well, all in good time. The next pair was announced. Reivs. Ueda Matsuri. Hinata took a small breath and walked down the stairs. "Good luck," Naruto hissed to her. Hinata smiled at Naruto briefly. "Thank you, Taki," she smiled. "I might need some of that later." "Hopefully not, but you never know," Naruto watched as she walked off. "You're surprisingly smooth when you want to be," Sasuke remarked. "What?" Naruto asked. "Yet he never seems to notice," Sai added. "It is weird, isn't it?" Sasuke said thoughtfully. "Extremely," Niji sighed. "I've been watching this whole thing for a while, his obliviousness never ceases to amaze me. Well, it's not like it's obvious or anything. What are you talking about? Naruto asked. The three just snickered a little. Meanwhile, Hinata and Matsuri had met one another on the field and bowed to one another. It's very nice to meet you, Matsuri said. A pleasure, Hinata returned. I hope that we leave all hostilities with us when we finish our fight. Do your best. Thank you, Matsuri mumbled. Hinata smiled a little back. This match is between Rei of Kusa and Ueda Matsuri, there is no time limit, and all previous rules apply. You may begin. Hate called. Hinata moved first, throwing a succession of kunai that forced Matsuri to run back to avoid them. Hinata dashed forwards, taking a deep breath and performing hand seals at the same time. Dakujiri! Hinata cried, breathing out. A stream of purple gas erupted from Hinata's mouth and turned into a cloud that diffused around the room. Hinata had been careful. While there was enough to cause trouble, there wasn't enough to be a true danger to the spectators. Even the opponent wouldn't be in any real danger if they were treated immediately. Matsuri didn't jump away, she turned her back and ran from the smoke, almost getting killed by the kunai that flew after her. Why don't you fight back? Hinata said softly. I'm trying. Matsuri almost sobbed. No, you're not, Hinata shook her head, you're holding back. If you continue to do this, I'll not only defeat you, I'll kill you. Why would you care? Matsuri asked bitterly. Because I used to be just like you, and because I want to fight an opponent who is strong, Hinata said, dashing forward and in a fluid motion, kicking Matsuri backwards. It's impossible, Matsuri said, stumbling back. Silly, Hinata said, performing a roundhouse kick that was blocked. Badly, it's possible to change. No one was born strong or brave or good. We were all weak and frightened and driven only by selfishness. Everything else is something you learn. If you're weak, grow stronger. If you're frightened, focus that fear until it's your strength. It was only then that Naruto noticed that the cloud of poison that Hinata had spat out was close and that Matsuri was a little weaker. She coughed a little and looked at Hinata. You herded me into it, she said. Yes, Hinata nodded, I do have to win, even if I have nothing against you. I have someone I have to keep up with. If he grows too far ahead of me, then I won't be worthy of him. I hope the next time that we fight, you will have something to defeat me with. I hope that you change for the better. Matsuri collapsed and Hinata looked over at Hayate with a calm smile. Ueda Matsuri is unable to continue. The winner is Rei. Naruto looked over at Danzo, who was looking at Hinata. It was impossible to tell just what he was thinking. Yes, that technique was one that Shizun used, but Shizun wasn't really much of a fighter, and also, that wasn't a distinctive style. Anyone who was good with poisons would be able to use that technique. At least, Naruto hoped so. Haku wasn't sure just what he was going to find or even what he was looking for, but he knew that this was the time to go looking around for anything. Danzo was busy watching everyone, and most of the Jonin were there too. If someone found him, Haku would just say that he was looking for the bathroom or something. If all else failed, he had a drug with him that would make anyone gullible enough to believe anything he said by just smelling it. Haku liked drugs and herbs. He was a medic, but his abilities were much more in the realm of plants than medical jutsu, and he was just fine with that. Tsunade had shown him what she could, but Haku just hadn't had the gift for medical jutsu. However, he had an almost scary ability with herbs and medicines, and, after all, they were on the same team. It wasn't a good idea to have people with the same abilities like that. There were things that he could do that Sakura and Hinata couldn't and things that they could do that he couldn't. The hallways were all uniform, yet the place was unexpectedly large. It was strange that they would have a place like this in the center of the Forest of Death, particularly if they only used it when the Chunin exams were in Konoha. What, then, was the purpose of having this kind of place there? It looked older, perhaps it had been used as an emergency meeting place for the Hokage and the Jonin during war or something. At least Haku was able to use his actual skill. Up until now, he hadn't known just how irritating it was to constantly be holding back. He was sure that the others were thinking the same thing. They weren't genin, and none of them had been at that level for years. It was tiring to have to pretend that they were just simple genin. It was even more annoying to have to watch these children, arrogant and mostly weak, talk down to the rest of Hakumei. Haku wouldn't have minded if it was just him. He wasn't that unaccustomed to being looked down on, but he couldn't forgive Yumi or even Kiba for their arrogance. While Haku wouldn't touch Yumi, she was Sakura and Sasuke prey now, he would be more than happy to bring her to them. In order for the pair of them to teach her a lesson. Haku waited a moment before turning a corner, pausing to see if any guards were on duty. Right now, it seemed like any reasonably intelligent 5-year-old armed with his grandmother's hairpins would be able to get through the security in this place. There weren't even many security cameras in the building. Was it that there was nothing to hide, or that all security was concentrated somewhere else? There was a sound almost like footsteps, and Haku jumped into the air and balanced himself into the wall's corner, performing a quick hinge over himself to hide him. If anyone looked, they might notice that there was what seemed to be a metal shelf on the wall. There were a few of them in the hallways, so Haku hoped that it wouldn't be noticed. 2 people walked under him, both were Uchiha. They were roughly in their 20s, and both of them looked like they were on some kind of break. "Yumi's doing a good job," one of them remarked. "I can't believe that little girl thought she could win against her. She's a foreign nin. What did you expect?" The other rolled his eyes. "Hiro, you're naive sometimes. How would that girl have a clue who Yumi was?" Hiro grunted. "Besides, not many people are up to Yumi's level," the unnamed Uchiha shrugged. "Well, for one thing, she's not dash," Hiro grumbled, and Haku leaned forwards, trying to hear. "Have you ever heard the saying walls have ears?" the other one said angrily. "If you say things like that, someone will eventually hear you, you idiot." "I don't care, maybe the foreign nin will leave if they figure it out, and then we wouldn't have to go through with all these stupid preparations. Treating foreigners is such a pain," Hiro grumbled. "I don't see why we have to do this. How does Aiko put up with you? She's a very lucky girl, and she knows it. You're such an unbelievable idiot." The 2 walked on, and Haku waited until the sound of footsteps had died away completely. He jumped to the ground and looked at where the 2 had gone. So, Konoha had some kind of thing that it had to do because of the foreign nin. Haku would have to keep his eyes and ears open for this, and just what was so strange about Uchiha Yumi? She wasn't what? Everyone seemed to be doing something, and all these plans were conflicting. Haku walked softly down where the Uchiha pair had come from, making sure his steps were quiet. There were still things he wanted to see. After all, he was in a perfect position to spy under the statement that he wanted to go to his room and rest, which he had already sent a bunch in to do, and his precious people needed all the help that they could possibly get. Shino's battle with the rather strange Ren had been interesting, but also one-sided. Shino had defeated Ren with his bugs easily, but Ren hadn't seemed to have put up all that much of a fight against it. Once again, Naruto was watching the whole battle, feeling like there were too many sides to this exam. It seemed to Naruto that Ren was deliberately throwing the match the way that Naruto had had 3 people who he had wanted to lose. Not only to make them seem weaker, but because it was good to have allies all over the place when you were about to attack something. Maybe it was just paranoia because they were less than legitimate, but Naruto was suspicious of everyone that seemed strange to him, and from what Team Kekkai Genkai had said, there was something wrong with the other team from Kusa. Naruto bit his lip and hoped that his not looking too hard into that team wouldn't come back and bite him at the most inopportune moment. Ren walked off to the hospital to be treated, and Shino returned to his place and stood next to Kakashi. It was interesting how, although Shino's insects actually ate his chakra to live, Shino was probably one of the few Konoha genin who were truly dangerous. Yumi was the only other one who Naruto had seen who might be a threat to them. Naruto might have to think of something to keep Shino's family from reacting too fast. Their logical way of thinking was actually very dangerous. They would react quickly and not be flustered easily. He would have to talk to Neji and Sasuke and Kimimaro about that. There was another ping and 2 more names appeared on the board. Sara vs. Dosa. Naruto blinked. For some reason he had expected himself or maybe Gaara to face Dosa. He wasn't sure why, just that was how he had envisioned things. Now that Sora was going to face him. Dosa walked back to Naruto as he headed for the stairs and didn't look at him. Naruto wondered just what was going to happen to him now. Sora seemed like he was completely unstable. Sora smirked and punched the air with one fist. Finally, some action! He yelled. Sora jumped down from the landing he was on and started to crack his knuckles. He was staring at Dosu and grinning darkly. I'm gonna tear you limb from limb, he promised. We'll see, Dosu said. It was impossible to tell just what he was thinking, due to the bandages over his face. His eye was glaring out at him, but he seemed to be thinking something. If Kimimura's report was right, he had better be thinking of some way to get away from this battle. Naruto didn't care how good Dosu's melody arm was. It couldn't match up to him when he was under the influence of the Kyuubi, and it probably wouldn't help him against whatever jutsu that Sora used to go berserk. Naruto would have never considered Sora to be a berserker. He seemed a lot like Kiba. Only more arrogant and with less family to back him up. This battle is between Kinyuta Dosu of Oto and Sora from Konoha. All previous rules apply. You may begin, Hayate said, swinging one hand in the air. Dosu had taken Sora's threat seriously. He performed a full sweep with his melody arm, not bothering to care about whether or not he hit Hayate, who had jumped to safety. Sora moved fast, running with the blast and trying to move closer. I won't let you. Dosu snarled, sweeping faster. Looks like I'm going to have to show off. Sora had almost unholy glee in his face as he took out his Pantra claws and slashed the air, futon, jahasho. The wind attack forced Dosu to jump back, barely managing to dodge the attack, and Sora dashed closer. I told you I won't let you. Dosu was sounding a little worried. Almost as if he could sense something. Come to think of it, Naruto was starting to feel something coming from Sora. It was somehow unnatural and sick. What is that? Naruto hissed. It feels familiar, Gaara said, looking a little sick. Sandy Wandies, trying to take over. This feels kind of like what you felt like in the forest, Sasuke hissed. Naruto tensed up, but that was impossible. All of the Byakuya were in known locations or their Jinchuriki were present and accounted for. There had only been one Jinchuriki made in Konoha anyways. It wasn't like the Byakuya usually attacked in groups. Naruto got the feeling that they didn't like one another much more than they liked anyone else. Even Jiraiya had never actually heard of an incident where more than one of the Byakuya had been present in one place at the same time. The Byakuya seemed to be solitary creatures. Unless he had been made into a Jinchuriki to contain a 10th Byakuya later, then it was completely impossible. Naruto could almost see the chakra around Sora. The boy was moving faster than even Sasuke or Haku could hope to, and slashed Dosu's bandages. There was a scream and the bandages started to fall down. Naruto was hit with both pity and horror at the boy's face. In addition to the new scratch wounds, the right side of his face was completely burned to the point where you could almost see the muscles. The right eye had been burned shut and his mouth was upturned into a permanent sneer. The burn scars seemed to stretch down his face to his neck, but the rest was hidden by the bandages. Dang, you're ugly. Sora said with a sneer, attacking again, this time attacking his chest. Dosu coughed and a large amount of blood started to come out. Dosu's good eye darted around and rested on Hayate. He didn't say a word, but there was a kind of proud desperation in his eyes. He needed help, but he was either too proud or too scared to admit it. Hayate caught the message. Dosu is unable to continue. The match goes to Sora, he said. Too bad. Sora yelled, I'm having fun. He dashed towards Dosu, his claw outstretched and looking like he had every intention of killing the Oto Nin. There was a clang and Sora looked with surprise at the blade of a katana that was blocking his path. Hayate didn't look quite so sick anymore as he gazed sternly down at Sora. I believe that I said that the match was over, he said calmly. Withdraw or you will be disqualified, and if you resist, I will attack. Naruto felt a spike of killing intent from the man. You know, I think that he's kind of dangerous, Sai said, I don't want to cross him. Wasn't he an Umbu? Hinata asked. I see why they were called, the elite of the elite, Sasuke said, his eyes glued to him. Naruto had a pretty good idea why he was so interested. Itachi had been in Umbu, and since Sasuke had been so young, it was hard for him to really understand just what that meant. Now that Sasuke was older, he was starting to truly understand what that really meant. Umbu wasn't just a profession. It was a philosophy. Sora snarled at Hayate, but he hesitated. There was a slight battle of wills going on. For one thing, Hayate looked sickly and like he wouldn't be all that hard to kill. He had moved surprisingly fast, and he didn't look sick all of a sudden. Naruto made a mental note to check on his past and see if that was a real sickness or just some kind of false one that he made so that people would underestimate him. It sounded like something that a ninja might do. This battle is over, Hayate repeated, and looked like he was about to attack just for good measure when Sora finally spoke. Alright, Alite, geez. Sora was suddenly an image of wounded pride. I was just playing with him. Can't you take a joke? Hayate said nothing, but motioned for the medics to take Dosu away and for Sora to leave the arena. Sora stalked off, and Hayate resumed his position. The computer began to whirl again and Naruto looked around. There was only one of Kabuto's teammates left along with Kyoko and Aoi from Kusa and, of course, Gaara. There wasn't much of anyone left. A feeling of relief hit him. Gaara's victory was guaranteed. Hopefully, their cover was fine as well. The ping sounded and Naruto looked up to see the names. Akadu Yoroi vs Shinta. Good luck, Hinata said softly, even though I know you don't need it. Gaara smiled, I'll be done shortly. Gaara did nothing at all conspicuous. While he couldn't have moved around through the sand, Gaara didn't seem to want to tempt fate too much. There was always a very dangerous chance that he would be caught or remembered. Best not to make his power too obvious. Yoroi shrugged, seeming completely indifferent to who his opponent was, and jumped from the balcony. The two faced one another and bowed slightly, but their eyes never left one another. This match is between Akadu Yoroi of Konoha and Shinta of Kusa. All previous rules apply. You may begin. At the word begin the cork on Gaara's gourd had popped out and a small stream of sand was drifting around him. Yoroi seemed to be a little smarter than most people, and didn't rush in. He sent two kunai with explosive tags flying at Gaara, who didn't bother to move. While Gaara was actually pretty fast when he wanted to be, he usually didn't bother to block attacks like that. His sand had plenty of time to react to something like that. As the smoke cleared, it showed Gaara, standing with his arms crossed and a shield of sand surrounding him. Yoroi hadn't waited to see what was going to happen. He had run up behind him and grabbed for him, in some kind of parody of a hug. Chakra Kyuinjutsu, he hissed. Thankfully, the sand was out already so no one was all that surprised when the sand reacted by exploding out and sending Yoroi into a wall. Gaara whispered something that could have been taken for a jutsu name but was more likely Gaara muttering to himself about how much force to use and how people were fragile. Gaara had to be careful not to use his sand the way he usually did, which would result in death if you weren't paying attention. Naruto knew that for a fact. Naruto looked over to see what Gaara's siblings were doing. Temari was leaning forwards with a bored look on her face, and Kankuro was doing something with what looked suspiciously like an arm of some kind of puppet. Temari sensed Naruto's gaze and looked over at him, rolling her eyes, and Naruto looked away. They didn't look like they had noticed anything. Actually, in this case, he was more worried about them than Danzu. Yoroi didn't seem to be moving and Hayate made a motion to examine him. It looked like he had been hit hard on the head and was out cold already. Naruto felt a spike of killing intent from somewhere. His eyes darted around but he didn't see anywhere that it should have come from. It wasn't directed at him or any one of Hakumei that much Naruto could tell, but the feeling was putting him on edge. How weak, Naruto heard Yumi sneer, and to think that that was a Konoha nin. Shinta-kun is very surprising, Shino said calmly. For a moment, Shino's sunglasses seemed to move so that he was looking at Naruto, but Naruto couldn't be sure. Do you think we should shut him up? Sasuke said in something that was barely a whisper. Later, Naruto said, meaning that he wanted to talk later. Akadu Yoroi is unable to continue, Hayate said calmly, the winner of his match is Shinta from Kusa. Temari wasn't all that interested in the next match between a particularly foul-mouthed Otonin and her teammate. She was fairly more interested in the match that had just ended. She continued leaning against the rail, without any real interest on her face, but her mind was racing. Was it possible? Temari didn't remember all that much about her youngest brother. What she did was mostly tainted by the fear that her village had had of the young Jinhiriki. She hadn't even been allowed to live in the same house as him. When she was younger, Tamari had thought little to nothing of it, but as she grew, she had wondered. When Gaara had disappeared, she had only had a vague feeling of sadness but mostly of relief. Gaara had mostly been a face that she was taught to fear. She was only slightly aware of Gaara's existence as a person, and that was only because of the one incident where she had actually been with him without her father or the elders of Suna watching over them. It had been when her pet cat had died. Nyanko-chan had been old and she had finally died in her sleep. Nonetheless, the 9-year-old Tamari had been devastated. She had wandered off alone to one of the many deserted and sandy places to bury her old friend, and she had been sitting with her face buried in her knees sobbing when she had felt the presence of another person. Tamari had looked up, thinking that it was her father, who would have reprimanded her for showing any kind of weakness, particularly for something so stupid as a dead cat. Instead, she had looked into the black-rimmed blue eyes of her youngest brother. Gaara, Tamari had breathed, not sure whether to be afraid of him or not. I liked Nyanko. He said softly, she wasn't afraid of me. Slowly, he held something out for her. Tamari realized that it was a figurine made of sand. She knew she shouldn't take it. Tamari knew that taking anything from Gaara was to invite the demon to take an interest in her. She knew that her little brother had been killed when he was born and the demonic Tanuki had taken his body, but right then, Tamari hadn't cared. I made this for Nyanko, Gaara had said, looking down. Tamari had reached for the figurine but had been interrupted by the sudden arrival of their father. The man had been furious that Tamari had run off and angrier that Gaara had appeared. The figurine was smashed, and Tamari had been grabbed and taken home by the elders. She had looked over her shoulder once at Gaara, who had watched her being taken away. His eyes had been so haunted. Tamari now looked at the red-haired boy who was talking to his friends. The blonde had an arm around his shoulders and the others were close, smiling and laughing with him. Shinta scowled a little at something that the boy with the long brown hair said, and smiled at something that the girl told him. He looked content and very attached to all of them in a way that told her that they had all experienced hardships together. Hey, Nei-chan, Kankuro said thoughtfully, isn't that Shinta guy kind of familiar? Tamari looked at Kankuro and looked at Shinta. For a moment, he glanced over at her and their eyes met. I don't know what you're talking about, Tamari said. Aoi has forfeited the match, therefore the winner is Kyoko, Hayate announced. The battle had been very boring. Neither of them had used a single jutsu, they had just attempted to pound one another into submission. They hadn't even used any weapons. Seriously, the theme of this entire preliminary seemed to have been don't show anything about your techniques to anyone because I'm hiding my real abilities. Well, at least this way they didn't look all that suspicious, only like they were keeping their real power hidden until the finals. Will the winners of all the matches please come down so that I can assign you your first opponents in the exam, Hayate called. Everyone slowly filed down into the center of the arena and stood single file, waiting to see what would happen. Someone had to go and summon Kimimaro from the infirmary, and he appeared quickly and took a place between Gaara and Hinata. Hayate walked along the line and handed each of them a piece of paper. When Naruto received his, he unfolded it to see the number 3 written on it. Naruto shrugged and waited. As I'm sure you're all wondering, the number that you've received is going to be matched up by random with another number. They will be your first match. The final exam will be held 1 month from today, Hayate explained. The computer began to whirl and the numbers began to match together. All right, Sora growled, who has 3? Naruto raised his hand, excellent, he said. Couldn't agree more, Sora smirked. Who has 10? Kyoko called out. Hinata stepped forwards and bowed a little, I look forwards to our match, Kyoko-san, may the best ninja win. Kyoko looked like she was trying to find an insult in her words, and couldn't believe that there wasn't one. No one could be that polite. Sasuke and Yumi's eyes met and both of them held out their numbers. 7 and 1. Nothing was said, but Naruto felt like the look that they were giving one another spoke volumes. Naruto could practically see the sparks flying between them. Until then, Sasuke said. It will be interesting to see how you plan to carry out your revenge, Yumi said in her perpetually calm voice. Neither bowed, and neither turned away from the other one. They simply ceased to acknowledge one another's existence. Well, it was better than just trying to kill one another at any rate. There would be plenty of time for that later. In the meantime both of them would probably attempt to spy on one another. Shikamaru didn't seem to want to bother with attempting to find out just who his opponent was going to be, but he soon found out when Temari calmly walked up, grabbed the paper out of his hand, and looked at it. "You're my opponent," she said, looking him over. "You better train yourself hard, loser. I hate weak men. I have a tendency to kill them." "Troublesome woman," Shikamaru groaned. "Why do I always get the weird ones?" Temari complained to her brother. First it was Mr. Personality and now it's a guy who might just fall asleep in the middle of the match. Kankuro shrugged. Niji looked over at Naruto. "Hey, Takei, it looks like you're going to have to fight twice," he said, looking at the chart of matches. "I have to fight you?" Naruto asked. Niji just smirked. "Just great. Why couldn't you have had to fight someone else?" "I hate fighting you," Naruto grumbled. Fighting Niji was no easy feat, even when he wasn't using the Byakugan. The guy was smart and he knew all of Naruto's weaknesses. A long time ago, he had been overconfident, and Naruto had beaten him. Niji had never made that mistake again. He firmly believed that everyone was to be assumed to be at least as powerful as himself and to be fought as such, even if he didn't treat them that way. Kimimaro and Shino, being the last ones there, both bowed to one another. "I will look forwards to our match, Yuma-san," Shino said. "I hope that we both learn a great deal from the experience." Kimimaro nodded. "I hope there is no undue tension between us because we are from different villages. After all, while a ninja serves his village faithfully, that doesn't mean that he must hate the ninja of other places." "I agree. That was likely to be an interesting match, if it even came about." Gaara was simply looking at Kankuro, who was biting his lip as he stared at him. From what Naruto could read off of his face, Gaara was upsetting the puppeteer. "The lineup is as follows," Hate said. "Yumi and Masaru will fight one another first, followed by Takei and Sora, Shikamaru and Temari, Rei and Kyoko, Kankuro and Shinta, Yuma and Shino, and finally the winner of the first match against Haru. You all have exactly 1 month to prepare for the exam. It will be held in the stadium at 8 sharp. If you are not present for your match, you will be disqualified. Name, rank, or reputation will not prevent this. The exam itself, as you can see, is a series of battles. The winner progresses to another battle, but the matches are judged not by who wins or loses but by who shows the mentality of a Chiryunin. In this way a person who lost his first match could become a Chiryunin, and the winner of the exams might not. Do you all understand?" There were some nods, but most of them just stared at him. Hate coughed a little and generally looked sick, but seemed to steady himself. "All of you are free to leave. There is an underground route out of the complex that you will be using. Foreign Nin, you will be staying at the same hotel. Train well, and good luck in the exams." Hate bowed a little bit and turned away, towards the stand where Danza watched. The man seemed rather uninterested with the entire ordeal. Slowly, the participants of the exams filed either to their rooms to get any supplies that they had left there the previous night, the door that led to the tunnel, or to the medical ward. Hakumei went to check up on Sakura, who they found sitting up in her bed, looking bored, and talking to Haku. He seemed to have come through another door. Sakura was twirling some hair between her fingers as she spoke about some idle nonsense. There were a few medics nearby and one of them was Tsunade. Naruto gave no indication that he had ever seen her before in his life, and passed her without a glance. "Emi," Suzuki said, not quite looking at her, "how are you feeling?" "Nothing too damaged other than my pride. The medics here are pretty good, they patched up my arm fast, but they said I need to wear a cast for about a week or 2. "Annoying," Sakura said. "Ryu told me all about what happened with Yumi. She was begging for it," Suzuki sneered, "and I promise you, she'll pay for what she did to you." Sakura gave him a strange look. Naruto couldn't quite place it, but the closest emotion would have been worry. She didn't bite her lip or look down, but just for a moment, her eyes had narrowed and her lips had lightened. "Don't push yourself too hard, and, if you're fighting her and you have to surrender, do it," Sakura whispered. "Never," Suzuki said angrily. "I'm not going to hold back, Emi, but don't worry, I'll be careful." Sakura sighed. I'm not going to get anywhere with you, am I? She grumbled, just don't do something incredibly stupid like that one time with the robber, alright? That memory is going to be one of those that is brought up when we're both old, and you have to shout it for me to hear it, isn't it? Probably. Tsunade broke up the meeting by walking up to them and giving Sakura a clean bill of health, other than the cast, and all but chewing them all out. She walked fine, but seemed a little on the tired side. Sakura kept looking over at Sasuke, but seemed to think better of saying anything. Nothing would dissuade him from his vengeance anyways. Well, I guess I know that he cares about me, Naruto heard Sakura sigh to him, but there's something really wrong with that girl, and I'm kind of worried that he might have chosen someone he can't beat right now. Don't worry, Naruto said, we have a month to train, and a month is a surprisingly long time. Chapter 23, Part 2, Break. Tenten hadn't left her room since she had returned to her home that night. Her foster father hadn't really said a whole lot, but he had congratulated her on making it to the preliminaries. Kimura Isamu was not good at speaking to people, but he was a kind man to his foster daughter, who he believed was completely undeserving of the suspicions that even his wife seemed to harbor towards the girl. She looked around the room now, at all the weapons and scrolls that littered it, and at the character for power that was painted over her bed above the intricate floral scroll work that was in her room. It was a room that usually she was very proud of, having both feminine and warlike aspects. Right now, she wished that she had been taken in by the baker. Why did things have to be so complicated? Tenten had joined for the specific reason of proving herself to be as worthy as any native-born Konoha ninja, but instead she proved that she was inferior to a foreign-trained ninja. She was surprised that someone from retirement hadn't showed up yet. Tenten had always wondered why she was even allowed to fight. That boy's face and words continued to come back to her. I wonder why you're so worried about the fact that I come from Kusa, Haru said conversationally as he whirled the staff towards her. Could it be because you're not from Konoha? Tenten growled a little, it's none of your business. It must have been difficult going to school after the Sandame's assassination. People in Konoha don't seem to approve of taking in foreigners as much as they used to, Haru continued, so you thought that by defeating me, a ninja from another village, you could prove that you were truly a Konoha nin. Shut up. Tenten screamed, taking out a scroll and making a mace appear from it. She jumped to attack, hitting the staff that Haru had stolen as he blocked. Haru just looked slightly amused. He was calmly and systematically attacking her psychologically, and Tenten knew it. He had learned through his fights how psychology was a go 4/5 of any battle, and he was using it very effectively. What is worse was that Tenten knew it, but she couldn't help fall into it. He was voicing all of her fears and doubts. Tenten was wearing down. It's funny, you're wearing the Konoha symbol on your head yet you don't feel like a leaf nin, Haru said, you know something else. At that point, Haru lunged forward, and struck with the staff, forcing Tenten back. For a moment they were close. He leaned forwards and whispered into her ear, I can see that you don't even like what Konoha stands for now. So why pretend? Tenten clenched her teeth and rolled over. No, she didn't like it. She hated it. She didn't mind competition, actually she loved it, but this hatred for the other villages was completely unnecessary to her. There was no reason to hate her rivals. Yes, they were from enemy nations, but they were paid to fight for one thing and she was paid to fight for another. There were no feelings mixed up in business. But that didn't even matter. Tenten had always seen that it was not important if she actually liked them. She wanted to make her foster father proud and she wanted to prove that she wasn't a spy to her foster mother. She had wanted an opponent from Konoha so she could prove that she was just as good, if not better, than they were. Instead, she had been crushed by a foreigner. I guess now I don't have to worry about people being suspicious of me, Tenten mumbled to herself inside of her pillow, they'll think that I'm too weak to be a spy. Beaten by a Kusa nin. But those words wouldn't leave her mind. She didn't even want to be like them. She thought that they were wrong. Tenten wasn't one of them. But what was she? We're as good as dead, Zuko said calmly. The three sound genin were sitting in the hotel room assigned for them and contemplated their future. They had been invited to stay and watch the end of the exams by a surly-looking Chiryunin who looked as if their presence was a personal offense against him, but the feelings of the natives really didn't mean anything to the Team 13. They were far more worried about what their boss was going to say about this failure. We weren't supposed to lose. At least not all of us, Kin groaned. Dosuo, I thought that you at least would win. Dosuo, who hadn't been talking much since being almost killed by Sora, just shrugged. And you weren't all that useful, Kin rounded on Zaku, you got owned so badly that it was pathetic. I'm sorry, Zaku shot back, I could have sworn I saw you getting your butt handed to you by Blubber Boy. It was a draw, Danny. Kin snarled. I looked like a defeat to me, hag. Would you two shut up? Dosuo finally exploded. What are you, infants? When Orochimaru-sama gets here, do you really want him to find you quarreling like that? I don't see how it's going to matter, Zaku growled. I mean, we're all dead anyways, so let's take this time to tell one another what we really think of one another. Starting with the wench. I'm not a wench, you flea. Kin nearly went for his throat. Orochimaru-sama will be pleased to see you in such high spirits, a cheerful voice said from the window. All three genin had already thrown a barrage of kunao that the newcomer deflected with ease. He was smiling at the fact that they had reacted, but his eyes remained cool. I'll leave out informing him that I could have killed all three of you right then, shall I? The man said cheerfully, but you do owe me a little bit of a favor now. We don't take orders from you, Kabuto, Dosuo said coldly. Orochimaru-sama might trust you, but to me you're nothing more than Konoha scum. But you do owe me, Kabuto sighed, and I had come to tell you such good news. All three of them looked at him in a very suspicious way. What's that? Zaku finally asked. Your lives are secure for the moment. You're lucky that we decided to keep some prisoners alive. Kabuto's black eyes had gotten a strange, unreadable light to them. Your next mission is simple. When the plan is set in motion, make sure that those grass genin don't interfere too much. Either convince them to leave or use a frequency to knock them out. Why can't we kill them? Dosuo asked. It wasn't like Orochimaru to show mercy. I doubt that you could, Kabuto said calmly. I don't know who they are, but I was able to see one of the groups attacking. They were no pushover. They might prove an inconvenience if they fight with Konoha, but they might prove useful if not harmed. If Kusa has 3 genin teams like that in their ranks, we've been ignoring them for too long, and it would be best not to cross them any more than we already have. Why do I get the feeling that you're not telling us the truth? Kin asked, tilting her head to one side. Because, Kin-chan, you're paranoid, Kabuto smiled, I'm never shown anything but loyalty to Orochimaru-sama. Now of course, if you refuse the mission, I'll be happy to tell him. We'll take your stinking mission, Dosuo said, but never forget, Oto doesn't trust you, Kabuto. Kabuto shrugged, as if you say that it wasn't really his problem, and in an instant, he was gone. Was it just me, or was he smiling? Zaku said. Man, I hate that guy, Kin whispered. The arguments of a few moments ago were completely forgotten as the team complimented their escape from death and what Kabuto was really up to. That night ended up with a party that had them up until almost 3. Even Sakura was in higher spirits than before. She had ended up singing karaoke with the rest of them and trying hard not to laugh at Niji, who always claimed he was rapping but sounded more like he was reading scriptures, as he had his turn. Not that Haku wasn't tone deaf and Gaara would know a tune if it bit him. When they finally returned to the hotel, they found out that Temari and Kankuro had been having some fun too. Apparently, the other guests hadn't been amused since they were busy pleading with the owner not to be kicked out due to their fun. From what Naruto could hear, it was something involving a puppet head hanging from a light fixture and some very loud music. Everyone decided to sneak around them. Naruto woke up the next morning feeling exhausted and like someone had stuffed his head with cotton. That's what he got for staying up until all hours of the night. Everyone else seemed to have fallen asleep where they had crashed. Everyone was sleeping in a row in the room, other than the girls, and Niji had somehow managed to get himself tied up and gagged by an ink snake. Apparently, he had kicked Sai too many times. Good morning, Haru, Naruto said brightening. Niji said nothing due to the gag, but glared over at him. Hey, Hideaki, Naruto called to Sai, Haru's giving me an evil look. Untie him. Sai opened one eye and looked over at Niji. 1 more hour won't kill him, Sai mumbled, rolling over. But it might just kill you, Sasuke, who seemed to have woken up, said, looking at the look Niji was giving Sai. Very likely, Gaara agreed. He had been sitting on the balcony, but at the sound of the conversation had decided to appear. He's been muttering death threats against you for a while. Sai sighed and loosened the snake. Niji glared at him and sat down a little way away without a word. Naruto looked around to see that there was something right next to him. With a slightly sinking feeling, Naruto looked at it. It was a large book with what looked like two angry girls and a guy who looked rather pleased with himself for some reason. Naruto didn't need to look at the title to know what it was. Ika Violence. Curse Jiraiya and his hobby. It was at that opportune moment when Sakura and Hinata came in to see Naruto holding the book. Sakura's eyebrow raised, and Hinata gave him a look that showed how disappointed she was in him. This isn't mine. Naruto said quickly, I woke up, and it was next to me. I'm not a pervert. Ero Sennin probably left it here last night when we were asleep, Kimimaro said from his very old position near the couch. It's a good idea if you think about it. Who would look for anything in a piece of drivel like that? Besides, no one in their right mind would want to read it, so it's safe from most normal people, Gaara said. He had been traumatized by those books as a kid and hadn't ever really gotten over his hatred of them. Naruto was pretty sure that if he was given half a chance, he would have destroyed every copy in existence and fed them to Shukaku. Sasuke came over and gave the book a very dubious look. Ero Sennin likes codes, he said. Does that mean we're going to have to decode it? Which means, someone would have to read it. Sasuke trailed off, looking at the book with a very dubious expression. How about we draw straws? Haku said. He's Taki's master. Why doesn't Taki do it? Niji seemed to have forgiven Sai enough to enter the conversation. We could draw bones, Kimimaro suggested. I wouldn't allow anyone to cheat. Other than yourself, Sasuke grumbled. I could do it, Sai volunteered. He might have written something in a different ink. Yeah, but, do you want to be scarred for life? Gaara said. It was placed next to Taki. Sakura finally said. Be brave, Taki. The others hissed. Naruto slowly opened the book and did nothing to hide the relived look as a small piece of blank paper fell out. Naruto picked it up, and as he did he got a small paper cut from the edge. Naruto was a little surprised until he noticed that the edges were a little too shiny. Razors. As Naruto's blood touched the paper, words appeared. Shibuya. You thought that you were going to have to decode that book, didn't you? Haha. Unfortunately, that's not even Ika Violence. It's a genjutsu. The real book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Sorry, but you're going to have to wait until you are old enough to read it. She who must be obeyed would kill me. I promise on all of your 18th birthdays, I'll give you all a complete signed set of my works. Oh joy, Sasuke rolled his eyes. On to more important things. Tell Haka that his letter was right, and those people who he wanted to look into aren't what they seem. We can't find anything out, but I'm starting to look. At any rate, I'm pretty sure all of you know that I can't help you with any kind of training, not that most of you need it. My movements are being so carefully watched that it's hard to even sneeze without it being written down. Of course I could evade being seen if I wanted, but it's better to know just where your enemy is. Tsunade's the same way. I've seen people following her into the bathroom. While you're figuring out if you're going to train or not, I'm going to fill you in on some very interesting news. My old teammate might just be around somewhere. If you see him, run. Hakumei, you are not prepared to face him yet. I'm keeping a watch for him, but other than the Sound Village's participation, I haven't seen anything much. Keep your eyes open. Don't contact me unless it's with one of your summons. Stay sharp and use your current psycho teacher to the best of your abilities. He was once one of the best, and he knows a lot about fighting. Gama-sama. Gama-sama. Hinata asked, looking over Naruto's shoulder. He really should have used a better name. Anyone could figure that out. It's too obvious, Sai said. No Rutanin would make the connection. They would be looking for some hidden meaning. You're kidding, Sasuke said. No, I'm not, Sai shrugged. By the way, can I have the book? If you want it. Naruto handed it to him. Sai took it and put it in his bag. Naruto found himself thinking that Sai must enjoy being weird simply for its own sake. That's just sad, I kind of feel sorry for them, Sakura said, shaking her head. She was in fairly good spirits after her defeat. Naruto suspected that it was more likely that she refused to feel upset. Kind of like how Gaara and himself refused to be upset that they both had a sadistic, insane yokai sealed inside of them. This wasn't something that he could help with, and it really would be best for Naruto to leave this alone. If she was able to be cheerful, then she would find whatever it was that she needed. So, we have 1 month to prepare for the finals. Sasuke changed the subject, apparently feeling that Root's weakness of not noticing the obvious wasn't worth much of a conversation. Should we train together or separately? The only thing I know is that I'm going to Ichiraku today, Naruto said. He was starting to think about something like, well, breakfast. Ramen freak, Sasuke rolled his eyes. Tomato freak, Naruto shot back. Also, the owner is in with Kainan, so it's a good idea for me to go there and see if there's any messages for us there. That's just an excuse, Sai laughed a little bit. It's a good one though, Haku pointed out, and one that we can't fight with. Maybe we can have someone else go though. Neji had a kind of evil glint in his eyes. No. Naruto cried in a very melodramatic voice, how could you do that to me? Have I not always been a good, kind person? You owe me 10 Ryu, Neji pointed out. What does that have to do with anything? Haku asked. I don't owe you 10 Ryu, I lent that to you 2 years ago as gambling money, Naruto huffed. Really? Sai asked. Yeah. I don't remember. Neji said thoughtfully. Who would remember after 2 years? Gaara asked, Taki, did you really expect anyone to remember? Nope, anyways, let's get going, Naruto said. Someone needs to find Honda-sensei and convince him to put up a good front training us. I'll go to see if there's anything waiting for us at Ichiraku. Emi, you, Hideaki and Ryu need to do surveillance. Just loiter around looking for gifts for someone or something. Masaru, stay away from the Uchiha clan. You're going to start a war. Everyone else, train with Honda-sensei if you can. Right, was the general assent from the group. When Naruto gave orders, they were usually followed, even if grudgingly. But before we do that, what's up with you and that Tenten? Naruto asked Neji. Neji smirked a little. I noticed that she seemed to be trying a little too hard to fit into this city. She was constantly spouting the garbage, but she seemed very, how shall I put it, strained. I learned about her past to see what was wrong, and I saw that she wasn't a Konoha-born nin. It made sense. I don't remember her in the early classes of the academy. She's adopted, and judging by the way the Konoha acts now, it's not going to be easy to be adopted, Neji explained, still smirking a little bit. There is a resentment in her mind that I intend to use. She's smart, so I'm not really manipulating her, I'm just forcing her to think about things. If I'm right in my assumptions, then she'll aid us or at least stay out of our way. You know, Haru, people are portrayed as the antagonist for things like that, Haku pointed out. True, but in the end, she wants someone to say that she's right anyways, Neji told him. And how would you know that? Sakura asked curiously, have you suddenly developed mind-reading abilities without telling us about it? If she hadn't been having the thoughts, my words would have had no effect on her, Neji said with a shrug. On another topic, Masaru, what's up with you and the Uchihas? You do realize? Sasuke nodded. I know just what I did, and I don't care, Sasuke grumbled. Sakura just shook her head. Everyone was prepared to leave within 15 minutes, and they left at different times. Naruto noticed that on the way down, Temari and Kankuro had managed to keep their rooms, but Matsuri seemed to be washing dishes. She looked very annoyed at life in general. It was a rainy morning, and Naruto didn't see many people around at the hour. He did notice that Sai and Sasuke looked like they had gotten together and were playing a game that Naruto could only call sensei hunting. Sai had even brought along some nets. At Ichiraku, Naruto happily devoured 3 bowls of ramen before he was finally given a note along with the bill. It was a simple sentence, but it was clear enough. Lay low and wait. Naruto wasn't expecting anything better, but he was still just a little disappointed. He paid and looked around only to see a large square box beside him. A square box with eye holes doesn't exist, Naruto said, didn't I already tell you that? The box exploded into a very large puff of smoke. Just what I would expect from the man that I respect. Konohamaru's voice yelled at least twice as loud as it should have been, but it started coughing almost immediately. Naruto waved the smoke away from him and waited for the kid to be able to breathe again. He had a bored look on his face, and deep down, Naruto was wondering just which god hated him so much that he would have to deal with this kid. Another free hint to being a ninja, Naruto offered as the smoke cleared: never use too much smoke. You don't want to be caught along with your enemies. I don't usually do this. Konohamaru said indignantly. You don't use smoke bombs? Naruto asked. Don't make your own for a while. But all ninja make their own. Konohamaru finally was visible, with his arms crossed. Naruto rolled his eyes. No one made their own smoke bombs, just like no one made their own exploding tags, unless they had a good knowledge of how to do it or were suicidal. Hakumei got their bombs and tags from Tsunade and Shizoan. They made them, but they were also experienced. Naruto was surprised that Konohamaru hadn't blown his head off or something. Just by the stupid bombs. Naruto was getting annoyed. I will not. Will no. I refuse to get into a fight with a kid. Naruto seethed. What do you want anyway? Train me. Did you figure out that jutsu I taught you? Yeah, you want me to show you? Or dash? Not here, you idiot. Naruto restrained himself from hitting him, knowing that he would get in real trouble. Let's go to a training ground or something. Then you can show me your jutsu, and I'll decide if you've mastered it. A training ground without girls would be best. Yeah. Konohamaru shuddered a little bit. What's wrong? Naruto asked, getting up. Konohamaru mumbled something and Naruto only caught the words scary girl intermixed in the jumbled up mutterings. Naruto smirked a little bit, so he had learned the weakness of that jutsu. Yeah, it would pretty much take Jiraiya out of action, but it wouldn't do a thing for a woman, who would only get angry with you. In fact, a ninja's risk of dying increased when that jutsu was used around women. At least that's what Naruto decided when he had accidentally done it around Jiraiya while Tsunade was walking by. That kick had almost killed him. It was a good thing to learn early on. Rule number 1 about being a guy: women always hit harder than enemies. Naruto was led to one of the many public areas that was far enough from the ninja sector to make sure that Naruto didn't get arrested for spying, and there were also very few ninja that would be present in such a wooded area. That way, no one would even notice what they were doing, and neither of them really wanted to be caught. Alright, you appear to have mastered the beginning of that jutsu, Naruto nodded. At least it didn't look like a sludgy thing anymore, it was definitely a person. Now all you have to do is make it look good. Do you have some girl in class you like? Anyone who made a real impression on you? Cute. Well, I guess you could say that. I saw a girl from my class, and it just kind of hit me, Konohamaru was muttering to himself. Somehow Naruto got the feeling that Konohamaru wasn't talking about what he thought. Well, try to do some that look more like her, okay? Naruto said, moving on. Do you know how to make a bunshin? That's boring. Naruto suppressed the urge to strangle the little monster. Konohamaru, I'm taking valuable training time to play with you. Either answer the question, or go away, he said between clenched teeth. Suddenly Naruto understood just how Jiraiya must have felt sometimes dealing with him. Had he been this annoying? Konohamaru glared at Naruto and muttered about wanting to know jutsu that did something. Naruto could sympathize with him, but not much. As Konohamaru stood, trying to create a bunshin with his face screwed up so that he looked like he was constipated, Naruto heard the sound of someone coming. He turned around to see 3 root ninja looking at him. Taki-san from Kusa. One of them, with a smiling monkey face, said. Yeah. You are under suspicion of entering the ninja section of Konoha. Please follow us. Haku read Isaribe's letter for the second time since he had actually had a chance to read it. She sounded happy enough. Most of it was just a long rendition of tests and medicine that she was taking, but there was an undertone of her happiness to at least be doing something about her condition. She mentioned that Shizun was very kind to her, and that she was trying to help around the house as much as possible, but Shizun would only allow her into certain places. Haku knew why. Isarabi seemed to just be generally happy with her life at the moment, but one line of the letter still confused him a little. Shizun-san has been very busy lately, and I believe that I will be seeing you sooner than I think. I look forward to it. What would Shizun be thinking to allow Isarabi out at the moment? She couldn't be healed yet, and even if she was, Isarabi shouldn't have been involved in a mission to Konoha that was essentially like going up to a hornet's nest with a large stick and smacking it to see what happened. There was no reason for Isarabi to be anywhere near them. Haku wished that he had a chance to talk to Tsunade, but knew that even if he could, she wouldn't tell him. Unfortunately, when dealing with an operation this delicate, it was best that the people acting out the parts only knew so much of what was going on. They would focus on their orders, nothing more. That way, if they were captured, no one would ever know everything in the plan. It was an annoying system, but it worked. Haku stood up and sighed a little. He was sitting on the roof of the hotel, which had a sort of courtyard for the guests to relax and enjoy the weather. Even though it was cloudy, Haku wasn't in the mood to be inside too much, or join in Suzuki and Sai's Honda hunt. While it sounded fun, Haku didn't really want to interact too much with the missing nin. Haku shifted and decided to get up and maybe look around Konoha a little more. There were some sites that were close enough to the ninja district to be important that he wanted to look at again. "Don't move, Gaki," a voice hissed from under him. Haku looked under the bench and was torn between laughing a little and just being disturbed. Zabuza was hiding under him. Honda-sensei," Haku said, tilting his head a little, "what's the point of this? I don't want to be caught by your friends, what do you think?" The man growled. "But, this is a little ridiculous? Stupid. Yes. Deal with it." "I'm not happy about it either," Zabuza snarled a little. "I either have to look stupid, or be forced into training those monsters. I don't see why you think that I'm going to help." Haku was getting more and more confused. Yes, he didn't get involved in these little games, but he would help them if they asked him. Kind of like he always helped Naruto with his pranks. Haku's loyalty was primarily with Hakumei at all times. "I thought that you were one of the sane ones," Zabuza grumbled. "What's insane about wanting to train?" Haku asked. "Everything. When I was a kid, our team's sensei had to hog-tie me if he wanted me to train. I'm surprised that you managed to survive Kiri's genin. Life-threatening situations do that. So long as you're sufficiently ruthless, you'll survive no matter what it takes. Even by killing your schoolmates." Haku's eyes were slightly dead. "Even by killing your schoolmates," Zabuza's eyes were completely dead. "Don't tell me you're so green that you've never killed for survival, and you call yourselves a team." Haku felt a spark of anger ignite in him. "I had already killed by the age of 8, he said, "but I don't boast about it the way you do." Zabuza eyed him again, this time with a more thoughtful look. "You're a strange one," he said after a while. "You don't have the eyes of a killer." Haku smiled a little bitterly. "You can't judge someone just by their eyes. Isarabi-chan didn't have it either, did she? Yet you still made her your apprentice." Zabuza looked away. Haku smiled, turned a little more normal. Zabuza was a little more complicated than he had originally thought he was. Maybe there was a chance that he would survive this whole thing with Hakumei's respect rather than their tolerance. "I thought so. You're a surprisingly kind person, Honda-sensei, for someone who claims to have enjoyed the life and Kiri so much. I wonder what made you leave." "Oh, I'm not asking, just wondering. Maybe one day, I'll learn just why." "Kiri's a place that makes you do some crazy things," Zabuza said, but didn't elaborate. He didn't have a chance due to the ink snake that had wrapped itself around his body and mouth. Haku looked down and saw. He stood up and looked at the two figures coming closer. They seemed to be being joined by others. "Good luck, Honda-sensei," Haku said. "I am off to write my reply to Isarabi-chan's letter." The only response was that of muffled cursing. Sakura and Hinata chatted lightly as they walked with some groceries. Hinata had decided that she would work on her training later, and that it wasn't fair to force Sakura to have to cook dinner every night. Haku and Sai also failed, and they weren't doing it. So then we have to wonder what that Kakashi guy is hiding underneath that mask of his, Sakura was saying. I've wondered for a while myself, Hinata admitted. Of course Taiki started giving everyone some really weird mental images, Sakura sighed. It was as bad as Masaru talking in that monotone voice of his about the horrors that could befall the poor fool who opened the scroll without permission. All I had to put up with was Hideaki and his warped sense of humor. I hope he didn't get it from us. Hinata admitted. I think he had it already. We just gave it a push, Sakura sighed. Both of them turned a corner, still talking cheerfully when they turned a corner and almost walked into someone. The person jumped back just as they stopped, narrowly avoiding a collision and spilling everything everywhere. Hinata looked at the person that they had nearly run over and felt her heart skip a beat. It was Hanabi. It had been almost 6 years since she had seen her younger sister. Hanabi still had the calm appearance that she had had when she was only a toddler, and the way that she carried herself said that she was still important within the clan. Yet there was an almost downtrodden pride to her, and Hinata remembered just what Kainan had said about the Hyuga clan having lost a lot of influence in Konoha. We're very sorry, Sakura, who didn't know Hanabi from any other 9-year-old, said, smiling a little. We were talking, and we weren't looking where we were going. Hinata fully expected a rude remark, but was surprised when Hanabi bowed a little. Not at all, I was thinking about things and turned the corner too quickly. I hope that none of your food was dropped. No, Hinata smiled a little bit. There's no harm done. Hanabi met Hinata's eyes, and Hinata was very glad for the genjutsu. Even the Byakugan wouldn't be able to see under that genjutsu. I'm sorry, but I need to return home soon, Hanabi said. My father will be expecting me home. With that, she was gone. Sakura's eyes followed Hanabi, and she looked over at Hinata. She looks a lot like you did when you were 9, she remarked. I'm not surprised, Hinata said softly. Sakura looked confused for a second, but then her eyes widened a little bit. Oh, was all that she said? Let's get going, Hinata said. Her voice was still barely above a whisper. We need to make dinner. It doesn't matter. Sakura smiled at Hinata a little, and Hinata understood a little of how Sasuke had felt when he ran into his mother. It must have been extremely difficult for him to have faced her as a total stranger. Perhaps it was the fact that his own mother hadn't even recognized him that had caused him to formally break his connection to his family so easily. He hadn't felt any real connection to them anyways. Hinata wasn't sure how she felt right then, but it wasn't sorrow over the lost connection. It was more of a dull acceptance. But she had been formally disowned along with Niji, and neither were permitted to use the Hyuga name. Sasuke had split himself off, and Hinata wasn't sure that she would have been able to do such a thing. Hyuga Hanabi sped up as she walked. That run-in had cost her precious time, but she was pleased with how she had handled the situation. She was sure that Hinata Oni-san would have done the same thing. Hinata had always been polite to people. It was funny, but once she was gone, the 4-year-old Hanabi realized that she had lost something important. Her father had completely retreated into whatever memories of his family when it was whole that he had, and was only seen when he was training her. It was almost as if Hinata, without anyone knowing, had become the glue that had kept everything together. Without her, her father had drifted away. Niji's disappearance had meant something too. The Branch family, which had always been a potential problem, was now almost mutinous. It was probably only the caged bird seal that actually keeping them from openly rebelling. Hanabi herself missed her sister, and she had never stopped believing that Hinata was alive somewhere, and she would come and see her one day along with Niji. It was a childish belief, but one that Hanabi privately indulged herself with. Until that time, she would act like as a proper heir when her family was around. With other people, she would try to show herself not only as a fighter but as a lady. Hinata would have wanted that. However, being a lady didn't mean that she wasn't allowed to punish perverts. The sound of running footsteps brought Hanabi out of her thoughts, and she turned around to see Kano Amaru, the little pervert that had come to embody all that was disgusting in a boy, dashing towards her. Hanabi! He yelled and waved his arms. He stopped in front of her, breathing hard. Hanabi, you've got to help me. Don't talk to me so familiarly, Hanabi said, mentally cringing. I don't care about that right now, Kano Amuro cried. Taiki Nii-san's in big trouble. Taiki, Nii-san. Hanabi repeated. She hadn't known that Kano Amuro had a brother. Everyone she knew had hinted that he was an only child. Yeah, Taiki Nii-san, Kano Amuro nodded. He was helping me with my training, and all these Umbu turned up and said that he was seen in the ninja district. Hanabi, you live around the area that they said that they saw him in, did you see him? Wait, Hanabi said, cutting through his somewhat difficult to understand explanation, this Taiki person isn't a ninja? And why would he be in trouble for being in the ninja district? Taiki Nii is a Kusan-in, Kano Amuro told her, he's coming for the exams. He's helping me with my techniques so that I can be a real ninja. If this Taiki person had helped Kano Amuro learn that horror she had to see, he must have been a pretty pathetic excuse for a ninja. Hanabi refrained from saying that and only said, I didn't see anyone strange. Good, then you'll come with me, Kano Amuro said, grabbing her arm and starting to drag her. They didn't believe me when I said that he couldn't have been there, but they'll believe you. Why should I help you? Hanabi hissed, you're just a nasty pervert. Because I'll go on a date with you if you do. Kano Amuro flashed a grin and a thumbs up as he remembered Metogai doing sometimes. Hanabi seemed at a loss for words as she was dragged along by the local delinquent. There was only one thing going on in her mind. She was going to kill him once her body started doing what her brain told it to again. Kano Amuro was a dead man walking. Gaara sat on the roof of the hotel and took a bite out of his sandwich. He wasn't all that interested in stalking Zabuza for training, since really, there was no training that could help him to control Shukaku, and his sand would do anything that he told it to so long as it was physically possible. He noticed that there were no root around, they seemed to have been called for something else. It bothered Gaara, but he didn't want to investigate too much. Also, he didn't want to run into his siblings. Gaara got the feeling that Temari knew who he was, although she wasn't going to tell anyone, but Kankuro might be different if he figured it out. Gaara had never actually spoken to his older brother, and he knew that Kankuro had seen him as a complete monster. It was really too bad. Gaara would have liked to have had a conversation with him. Well, things could have been worse. He could not have run into Naruto and the others that day. Gaara's faith in a power of good was solidified because of that meeting. They had brought a light to him when he was in a darkness so deep that nothing else seemed to be able to touch him. It was strange, Gaara didn't really remember all that much about his childhood before meeting the rest of Hakumei. It was a blur of misery and the dull ache of loneliness. He remembered the face his uncle, who had betrayed him, and he remembered the faces of his sibling, who had thought that he was a monster. Really, Gaara was lucky. It would have been easy for him to have remained there until he sank into madness, and if any of the stories that the others told him were true, he had been about to go insane when they found him. There was a sound of someone coming onto the roof and Gaara turned around to see Temari watching him. She really hadn't changed all that much from his childhood. She was taller and more mature looking, but her face was the same, and her eyes were the same. Hello, Temari said, I noticed you were here, and I wanted to apologize for any trouble that me and my brother caused last night. She smirked a little as if daring him to ask what they were doing. We were out celebrating most of the time, Gaara said. Had we been in the room, they would have probably kicked us out with the noise that we were making. Temari laughed a little. Good, she looked at him hard, you look a lot like my younger brother. Really? Gaara asked, not showing the worry that was gnawing on his stomach and Sandy Wandy's cries for blood. What's he like? He disappeared a long time ago. Most people in the village think that he died. I don't though, Temari smirked a little. Gaara was a really tough kid. Nah, I think he lived. I'd have liked to see him again, and tell him that I really do love him. If he was competing though, I'd want him to get out of the competition. Why's that? Gaara asked, so, this was a message to him. He kept the smile at her other words hidden, focusing on the warning. Well, things are going to get a little nasty, you know, Temari grinned. While I'm sure Gaara could have handled himself, I'd be worried about him. Gaara nodded a little and smiled. I'm sure your brother would have been glad that you worried about him. He's lucky. He's probably lucky that he ran off, Temari said thoughtfully. We were pretty rough on him. Well, I hope you do well against the Nara kid, Gaara said, knowing the conversation was over. I'll crush him, and one day, I want to go after your annoying little friend, Temari said with an evil look. I'm going to kill him. Sadly, you're going to have to get in line. Every time he meets someone he insults them, Gaara sighed. I'm surprised that people don't fight over the right to kill him yet. Temari laughed and turned away. Jane, she said, look forward to my fight. Gaara watched his older sister leave with a smile that hid his thoughts. So, something was going to happen that she was involved in, and she didn't want him to be too involved for his own safety. Gaara sighed. This Chunin exam had so many sides and alliances that it was giving him a headache. Well, more of a headache than usual. Gaara dissolved into sand as he decided to warn the others. Another hint, but Temari was a possible ally also. At least, she wasn't going to attack them willingly. Chapter 24, Part 2, Allies. There were few things that could possibly be worse than this in Naruto's opinion. He was about to be tortured for information by one of the most infamous inquisitors in the ninja world, and there was nothing that he was going to be able to do about it. Marino Ibiki stared at him, and since Naruto was between two root ninja, he was feeling even more nervous. That didn't mean that he was going to show anything though. Naruto kept a look of total lack of understanding on his face and hoped that Ibiki couldn't read him too deeply. So, this is that Taki person. Ibiki said, looking him over. Yes, I remember you. Bring him in. The two Roonin started moving, and Naruto, not wanting to be dragged or anything like that, started to walk with them through the door into Ibiki's interrogation room. It was a place that Naruto had once heard Jiraiya talking about when he spoke of the big people in Konoha and Hakumei's briefing before their mission. From the tone of Jiraiya's voice, Naruto had always expected the place to be a dark dungeon filled with screams and very large, dramatic-looking torture equipment. What was really there was a large, plain room with a desk with two metal chairs facing each other across it. A single lamp was lit on the table, providing the only light in the room. There were no windows at all. While the room didn't look like a torture chamber, the plain white walls, lack of carpet and completely cut-off aspect of the place gave Naruto a feeling of unease. Sit him down, Ibiki said in a bored voice, and get lost. I don't want you two breathing down my neck, while I perform a delicate job. Naruto was forced into one of the two seats, and noticed that the light was aimed so that it fell into his face in a very uncomfortable way. Shall we inform the Hokage of this? One member in a smiling monkey mask asked. Don't bother, Ibiki barked. You've been getting false reports about people turning up in places they shouldn't all day. Maybe you should bring in the people reporting it. This is a precaution and you know it. If you reported every rumor about someone sneaking around, the Hokage wouldn't be able to leave his office. I'll question the brat, and if the report's legit, I'll hand him over to you two. Until then, allow me to do my job in peace. The two root members bowed and left. Naruto and Ibiki were alone in the room, and there was no one to help him. Slowly, Naruto took a deep breath and cleared his mind. Jiraiya had taught all of them just how to handle torture if they were ever put under it. Naruto slowly built up a memory of the celebration of the victory against Zabuza and prepared to dive into it. You look like you've been taught pretty well, Ibiki said, looking him over, but if you answer my questions like a good boy, it won't be necessary. Naruto looked at him, prepared to answer with the truth only if it was in his interest. Ibiki smirked a little, as if reading his mind. All right, kid, were you in the ninja district this morning? Nope, Naruto said. I was in my hotel room, which all my teammates can verify, and I went to one of the ramen bars around here. Then I got rounded up by Kano Amaru, who seems to want me to train him for some reason, and made to come with him. That's it. Ibiki looked at him and smiled. It wasn't pleasant looking. I'm going to tell you this only once. I have sent my team to track your whereabouts, and if you're lying, it's going to be even more unpleasant for you. It's only because you're from a village that's allied with us that you're getting any kind of investigation at all. If you were from one of the other villages, you'd be in a cell right now. If you are lying, the relationship will crumble, leading to an attack on Kusa. Are you sure you don't want to tell me anything? It appeared that Ibiki really liked psychological torture. It was usually considered to be much more effective and dangerous than normal kinds, and the victim would be more willing to tell the truth, rather than just what they thought that the torturer wanted to hear to make them stop. So that was why he didn't have equipment in this room. He probably had it from the tougher ones, but for most people, it wouldn't be needed. This guy was hardcore. There is nothing that I've been hiding about where I've been going this morning, Naruto said. If your investigation digs up something, then it's a lie. You have guts, kid, but I already knew that, Ibiki smirked. After all, a memory is never completely forgotten. Naruto forced his face to be blank, but it wasn't fooling Ibiki. If anything, the guy just looked kind of amused. Apparently he was more used to seeing the innocent act than Naruto was used to giving it. He grinned a little. Kid, if I wasn't a part of Kainen, you and your little friends would be enjoying the view of our holding cells around now. Ibiki rolled his eyes. I was one of the first people recruited. If I wasn't, there would have been no Kainen. They would have been arrested. That made sense. Naruto relaxed. Ibiki had a real point. It was actually pretty reasonable to think that Ibiki would have to be a member, and really, if he did know who he was, Ibiki wouldn't have come up with some kind of elaborate scheme. Naruto would have simply been arrested along with the rest of Hakumei. Possible executed on the spot. Alright, Naruto sighed, I'll believe you. So what's up with this little arrest? Someone, probably your opponent for the exams or someone who supports him, wants you disqualified. Little does he know that he's the one who's going to get it for soiling Konoha's good reputation. The smile on Ibiki's face told Naruto not to ask too many questions. This means that you're going to have to sit and wait like a good little boy while I fill out all the paperwork that says that you had nothing to do with anything and are the victim of slander. While I'm out, send a message to your little friends too. They look like the type to storm the building if they find out that you're being held here. That sounded like it would be more or less the truth. So is there anything that you want me to stay out of? Naruto yawned. Ibiki gave him a strange look. There are plenty of places that Danzo would want you to stay out of. He gestured over towards the other door. The prisoner's cell has cameras all over the place to watch the prisoner who is most interesting. Funny thing about that, all the cameras are being watched only by my special assistant, Anko. With that, Ibiki left, slamming the door behind him with a subtle show of annoyance that would be impossible to tell wasn't true. It looked like he was annoyed that he hadn't had a chance to torture Naruto into a drooling fit, and maybe he was. From what Naruto had seen of the man, he was both everything he seemed and nothing like it. Sai was feeling rather cheerful as he wandered aimlessly around Konoha. He had helped Sasuke find Psycho-sensei, which was always fun to do, but the missing nin really couldn't do all much to help him. Actually, he couldn't do anything. This wasn't really a surprise to Sai. He knew perfectly well that no one would ever really be able to help him with his abilities. Sai was too specialized. Even when he had been en route, Sai had had to train on his own. Route. That word brought back memories. Particularly now that he was back in Konoha. It was funny how little he knew about the actual city. He had been taught about its history and its system of government, but he had never actually walked around the city itself until that night. Sai smiled a little at the thought. He really had been lucky. Maybe his brother had left a kind of gift behind for him. Sai turned a corner into a flower shop. Maybe he should buy some flowers for Sakura. She had lost and it was probably a blow to her. Also, it would make Sasuke jealous. Sai was pretty good at noticing the emotions of other people. He had seen how Hinata always pay special attention to what Naruto said and how Sasuke and Sakura had this strange little thing that would probably blossom into love. Ero-sensei had once said that Sai would probably be the best novelist of the group. He was pretty sure that that wasn't a good thing, but still, he could guess relationships with other people. Sasuke would inevitably get angry and glare and then buy Sakura some flowers himself. Sakura would grumble about how she didn't need them, and she would treasure them. She hated to show any kind of weakness for things like that, but Sai knew that she would love it. With a smile, Sai walked into the small shop. A bell tinkled overhead and the girl at the counter looked up. It was a pretty nice flower shop. The place had a open, well-lit feel, all the walls and shelves were covered in flowers. Some of them were already in arrangements and others were just in groups of their own kind. The sheer variety and color of the place was enough to make Sai stop and stare for a moment, trying to appreciate everything. "Hi, welcome to the Yamanaka flower shop. How can I help you?" The voice of the girl broke Sai from his thoughts and he turned to face her. It was Ino, the girl from the Chiyunin exams. She was reading what looked like a book on flowers, and when she recognized him, she smiled a little. "Hello, Miss Gorgeous," Sai said, smiling brightly. "I didn't know that your family owned a flower shop." Ino smiled a little bit. "It was my mom's idea. She wants us to do something that isn't killing people." "How's your friend? The one who went up against Uchiha Yumi?" "She's fine," Sai told her, a little depressed that she won't be competing in the exams. "I was thinking of getting her something to cheer her up. Girls like flowers, and it might make Masaru get angry and think about her too." "That's the guy who made a blood feud?" Ino asked. "Too bad." "What?" Sai asked, not quite getting what she meant. "Oh, nothing," Ino said with a smile, "nothing at all." "So, you're looking for something for your friend, HM. You want her to have courage to keep fighting, right? So that would mean you want some Edelweiss, your feelings are of friendship, so jasmine, and some nice yellow poppies for success." As she spoke, Ino started to pick flowers out of the shelves and began to arrange them into a bouquet. She seemed to be enjoying herself a little, chatting about unimportant things. Sai noticed that while the shop seemed to be very high quality, there weren't any customers other than himself. Sai opened his mouth to ask why, but decided against it. While he usually lacked all tact, Sai knew a question that shouldn't be asked when it was staring him in the face. "This looks really good," Sai said, though he had no real knowledge of flowers, and he had always kind of thought of them as weeds that were trying to look like they weren't. While some flowers were useful, most were just pretty and nothing more. "Thanks, I enjoy doing this as a hobby, but I don't get to show people very often," Ino chatted happily, but then looked a little upset. "Why's that?" Sai said, hoping to find out a little more about Konoha. Ino sighed a little. "My family doesn't support the Godame, so a lot of people won't visit our shop. It's not that we need the money or anything, it's just tiring," Ino said, leaning on the desk. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but really, who are you going to tell? I kind of wish that Mom and Dad would just give in, it's not like it'll do any good. Defying the Godame is like defying gravity. It's completely impossible." Sai smiled a little, his false smile. "I'm sure you're right, but people try to defy gravity on occasion, no matter how foolish." Ino looked at him a little suspiciously. "Are you trying to get me to join a revolution or something?" "Nope, I'm just imparting sage-like knowledge." "Where did you get this sage-like knowledge?" "My friend's master is full of it." "You're a little on the strange side, you know that, right?" "My friends say that all the time, Miss Gorgeous." Ino laughed. "Well, I'll forget you're trying to lure me to the dark side if you forget about my moaning, and call me Miss Gorgeous in front of Uchiha Yumi. She's way too proud of her beauty for her own good." "I'll come back and listen to you moan tomorrow if you want," Sai suggested. Ino seemed full of information about the feelings of the people, and that was very useful. As long as he was nice and pleasant, that would work. "I won't lure you to the dark side if you don't want me to." Ino smiled a little bit, and nodded, but was interrupted by the appearance of Shikamaru, the boy who had been one of Naruto's friends. "Hey, Ino, has Nico-sensei been by?" he asked. "I thought I heard her say that she was going to find someone to train you even though you weren't in the exams." Ino looked a little puzzled, twisting one short piece of hair that she still let hang down, and shook her head. "Nope, it's only been him," Ino motioned her head at Sai, "all morning." "Do you think that she forgot?" Shikamaru shrugged. "I don't have a clue." "Oh, by the way, Hideaki, right? I saw your friend, Taki, walking with some of Root. Was he in the ninja sector or something?" "Not to my knowledge," Sai said, still looking confused, but his mind was racing. Could they have been found out? He had to find the others and tell them right away, and if rescuing Naruto meant blowing the mission, then Sai was perfectly happy to forget the whole thing. Sai had grown to see the others as everything. So long as all of them were alike, they'd think of something, and, to Sai, the lives of each of the members of Hakumei was worth a lot more than the village of Konoha. After all, what was Konoha to him but another village? He had no happy memories of the place. His first happy memories had been with Hakumei. "I guess I should be going," Sai said with a smile. "See you, Miss Gorgeous, Pineapple." Ino started to giggle as Sai walked off, and Shikamaru looked like he would have made a comeback if it wasn't so much trouble to think of one. Sai wasn't paying any real attention to the two of them anymore, he had to find the others. Sasuke looked at the giant sword with some disgust. Zabuza's monster might be nice if you could pick the thing up, but it was useless to him and pretty much every other normal human being in the entire world. Unless you were built like a horse. "Hands off, brat," Zabuza snarled. "Didn't your mother ever tell you not to touch other people's things?" "No, I don't remember her saying any such thing," Sasuke growled. "Why do you have this monster? What's wrong with a katana or something?" "Katanas are for samurai, bottom feeder," Zabuza said, glaring over at him, "and the good ones are expensive. This thing was made especially for me." "It's going to be slower than a smaller sword," Sasuke pointed out. "Yeah, but a smaller sword doesn't have as much of a chance of killing instantly," Zabuza smirked, "and she can kill a large number at the same time." Sasuke wanted to say that few people would have the situation where they needed to basically kill a horse, but decided against it. Zabuza was supposed to be teaching him. Sai had wandered off to do something that he hadn't specified, and Niji and Kimimaro were sparring with one another. Gaara was still off wherever it was that was high so that he could think, and Hinata and Sakura were probably doing whatever girls did in their free time. To tell the truth, Sasuke was slightly mystified by girls, particularly those two. Truthfully, since the battle on the unfinished bridge, Sasuke had been thinking about having a sword of his own, yet it was impossible for him to train with one. He didn't own one for one thing, and Sasuke needed a master to teach him. Jiraiya barely knew how to even hold a sword right. His toads used swords, not him. Tsunade also wasn't a sword person. The others didn't need swords either, most of them were able to either make weapons for themselves or just didn't require such a thing. Sasuke was starting to think that. It seemed that Sasuke was either going to have to learn on his own or forget it. There was no way that he was going to separate just to find a master. This set him to wondering just what was going to happen when they assassinated Danzu. Would they stay in Konoha or go off on their own? Sasuke was more in favor of going on their own, if only because he didn't know how to even talk to his mother and father, and he would like to see if he could find Itachi. None of them really had a reason to stay. Naruto had never been liked to begin with by most people, Sasuke didn't want to see his family, Hinata and Niji had been disowned, Sai was just an orphan, and Haku, Kimimaro and Gaara didn't even come from Konoha. The only one who had a reason to stay was Sakura, and there was a chance she would want to go too. After all, they didn't even know if her family was still there. While civilians almost never left a village, Sakura's family had been merchants. They might have moved their business to another location in Fire Country if only to be away from the memories. While Sasuke knew that the others would go with him if he asked him, he wasn't sure that he wanted to. After all, they didn't even know why Taki had left. All they knew was that he was a missing nin. He wasn't sure if he wanted to ask them to help him chase his older brother around the world. "Hey, Twig, don't blow a brain cell, you need all of the ones you have," Zabuza called. Sasuke bit back the comment that Zabuza would know since he had lost all of his a long time ago, and turned to face the others. He would worry about Itachi later. It was always best to focus on the mission during the mission. Thinking about other things were just distractions. After all, he only had 1 month to figure out how best to not only defeat but to humiliate Uchiha Yumi. It had taken every bit of self-control that Sasuke had had not to kill her on the spot. How dare she, a false Uchiha who didn't even have the Sharingan, dare to even breathe on Sakura? The thought of it now made him want to go kill her, but that was jeopardize the mission, and then everyone would be annoyed at him. Also, he wanted to avenge the Sandaime too. Sasuke had always liked the old man. "Masaru," Kimimaro said to Sasuke, breaking him out of his thoughts, "have you noticed today that the root nin seem to be following us?" "Yeah," Sasuke grumbled, "I think it has to do with them wanting to spy on our techniques." Sasuke had no problem with saying that aloud. After all, it was the truth, and if he got in trouble because of it, everyone was oversensitive. I'm for ignoring it, Neji said, as long as we keep our best moves secret, there's no reason not to let them spy. After all, if we know who the spy is, we can feed them the kind of information we want. You really are evil, Kimimaro said calmly, taking a drink from the milk carton that he had brought with him, but I wish you wouldn't state your plans where the people involved can probably hear you. It does kind of ruin the whole thing, Sasuke agreed, trying not to laugh. It was amazing how fast the mood could change. Now they'll know you're keeping stuff from them. And they'll have to deal with it, Neji grumbled. The conversation was interrupted by Sai's appearance. He had been running, and his breath was coming out in sharp gasps. If that wasn't enough, he was looking worried. If Sai allowed any kind of emotion on his face, it was a sign that something really bad was going on. Masaru, Taki, Root, questioning. He gasped out, distracted, dog. It didn't take a genius to figure out what Sai meant. Naruto had been found out, but they had time to plan since the Rootnin watching them were busy chasing after one of Sai's animal drawings. That would give them some time to plan. Sasuke turned around, his eyes cold and hard, suppressing the urge to activate the Sharingan. He would kill them all if Naruto was hurt. While Sasuke knew perfectly well that Naruto could withstand torture, he was actually the best of them all at it. There was only so much that he could take, and Ibiki was considered to be the best. They were going to have to move very, very fast. Yuma, find Shinta, and the girls. Haru, get Ryu, Sasuke ordered. Zabuza stepped back, looking a little interested. Sasuke wanted to snap at him. Yes, they were going to start the invasion early. Yes, their chances of failure just spiked. So what? Sasuke's orders were interrupted by the poof that preceded a summon. Sasuke almost sighed when he saw Gamatotsu, Gamekaki's younger, dumber brother. Well, it was a good sign. Hi, Sasuke. Gamatotsu said in this infuriatingly slow way, Naruto and I-san said that you were going to give me snacks. Sasuke covered the frog's mouth instantly, praying that the Rootnin weren't close enough to hear. You idiot, he growled, do you want to get us killed? If you say our names again until this mission is over, you'll never get snacks again. That caught the toad's attention. No snacks. Sasuke could hear the horror in the muffled protest. Dead men give no snacks, Kimimaro said in a philosophic tone, is your summoner okay? Ns he gave me a message. Gamatotsu said proudly. Sasuke leaned in a little along with Sai and Neji. Yes. All three of them said. But I forgot it. Sasuke almost killed it. Why had Naruto summoned Gamatotsu of all toads? Couldn't he just have summoned one of the other ones? Calling this guy stupid would be an insult to stupid people, or toads. Was it a call for help? Sai asked. No. Do you remember anything about it? Neji asked. He said I could have snacks if I delivered it. Is he alright? Sasuke snapped. He didn't look sad. Did he look upset, like he hadn't had any snacks for a long time? Kimimaro asked. Gamatasta looked horrified at the thought of not having snacks. He was smiling. Gamatotsu said, he said that he was fine and that you didn't need to do anything. He must have had snacks. Sasuke bowed slightly to Kimimaro, thank you, oh great bone user, for sparing my poor brain from this stupidity anymore. He tossed some candy at the little toad, who cheered a little and disappeared. Why does he even use that thing? Sasuke snarled, it's living proof that it's possible to live without a brain. Well, if you were a Rootnin, it would drive you crazy, Sai said thoughtfully, it's completely illogical, can't really understand threats, unless they involve snacks, doesn't fear anything, and can disappear if he's bored. It would be enough to give some members nightmares, if they had the imagination for one. Sasuke grumbled some more, but deep down he was relieved. There was no way that anyone else could have sent that toad as a messenger. Naruto was fine. It had probably not been anywhere near as bad as they had thought. Well, they were all jumpy. That wasn't going to stop him from murdering Naruto when he got back for worrying him. Naruto had to admit, Sneaking around the interrogation cells of Konoha wasn't the most brilliant idea that he had ever had. In fact, it was an idea that could have killed him if he was caught. So why was Ibiki saying that he should look around? The place didn't look like much to write to Bah-chan about. It was a long hallway that was well lit, and seemed to be mostly made of metal. Well, it would have been hard for anyone to get out of here, but Naruto had always had a more dank and dark place in mind when he thought of dungeons. Maybe he watched too many Princess Fune movies. Naruto whistled a little bit as he walked down the hall. There was no one there, as Ibiki had basically said, and he was feeling a little overly brave. Besides, he might as well give Anko something to entertain her. Would you shut up? A woman's irritable voice asked, either put away the dying bird or put a cork in it. Naruto turned around to face a cell with the door closed. Aren't you a little young to be doing this job? The voice asked. Naruto curiously looked in the barred window to see who it was. It sounded like a woman, and he had the feeling that this was the person who Ibiki had wanted him to talk to or at least to see for some reason. Inside the small, well-lit cell was a woman. Her blonde hair was tied up into a single pigtail that fell down her back, allowing only a small tuft of hair at the end, rather like a lion's tail. Her clothes were dirty and a little torn, and she looked like she was about 18, maybe 19, and her black eyes were rather oddly shaped. Sort of like a cat's. Naruto knew that he was looking at one of the Jinchuriki like himself. Jiraiya had long ago taught him how to recognize a Jinchuriki, and one of the signs was a physical marking on the body, usually the face. Another was if his stomach grew hot as the fox strained to get out and fight with the other Jiraiya. Apparently they all hated each other. This woman was one of them, but he had figured out yet how to tell which one it was. The woman seemed to have realized what Naruto was because for a moment, an emotion that Naruto didn't recognize flashed into her face. So, did they bring you here to learn a lesson or something? She asked, what would happen if you put one little whisker out of line? Nope, I'm not supposed to be here at all. The guy said that there was something that I should see, so here I am, Naruto admitted. I didn't expect to meet you here. Why are you in here? I didn't think there was another one in Konoha. I'm not from Konoha, kid, the woman rolled her eyes. My Hitayite was taken, but I'm from Kumo. My name's Nii-Ujito. I'm Taki, Naruto said, hoping that he didn't sound too rude. Ah, one of those. Ujito smirked. She was better at spotting liars than most people. Well, I'm not in any position to sell you out. I'm just a prisoner of war, and for some reason, Mr. Sadist seems to want to save me until after the exams. I guess he really gets into the spirit of them or something. It seemed that Ujito was willing to talk to him so long as he didn't ask nosy questions like the system of the government. So you're being held for ransom? Naruto asked. Ujito laughed at that, a cold unpleasant that showed a dark humor in the question. You must have some really good friends out there, kid, for you to assume that Jinchuriki get treated like normal people. Ujito smirked, we're weapons, kid. That's the reason we were born for. You were born so that you could hold a monster and protect a village that fears and hates you. The Raikage isn't going to waste his resources on a weapon that got captured. The only Jinchuriki he cares about is his brother. And B's always trying to run away for some reason. I guess he's been talking to his Bijiryo too long. Never a good thing. B. Naruto asked. Killer B, he's got the Hakumei. Ujito rolled her eyes, he's annoying but useful. She wasn't going to tell him anything else. Either she was still loyal to Kumo, or she thought that he was a plant to get information out of her. Or both, but now Naruto was worried. He knew perfectly well what happened when a prisoner of war wasn't ransomed back, at least in Danzu's Konoha. Something of Naruto's thoughts must have entered his face. He was still bad at hiding that kind of thing, because Ujito nodded once, her eyes cold. Yep, I'm going to be executed once they've gotten what they want out of me. If you get seen talking to me, you're going to be in the same position. Naruto, despite training, was an impetuous person, and his true nature took that moment to come roaring forth. No way. He said, just you wait. I'll get you out of here, and you won't be executed if you come with me and my friends. Ujito didn't look all that convinced. Great, kid, just great. You do that. I'll wait here, She rolled her eyes. What have you got to lose by trusting me? Naruto asked angrily. Let's see, my sanity, my reputation, my life, my mind, little things like that. Naruto glared at her. Yujito smirked at him. I'll believe you when you come back with the keys to free me, kid, no time sooner. Alright, then just wait, Naruto said. I promise that I'll get you out, but if I do, you have to help me and my friends. If you get me out of here, I'll swear loyalty to any group you want me to, Yujito said, and you can call me on it. Agreed. Naruto was just being led out of the interrogation room to the waiting room, where he would wait until his release was signed when Kano Amaru showed up with what appeared to be his reluctant girlfriend in tow. She looked a great deal like Hinata, and after a moment, he realized that this must be the sister that she sometimes mentioned, Hanabi. She didn't look too happy with the arrangement. She glared balefully over at him, and Naruto found himself feeling a little sorry for her. Kano Amaru was hard to keep up with sometimes. Let Takenai-san go. Kano Amaru yelled very loudly and dramatically. Ibiki, who had been leading Naruto off, stared at him. What is this? He asked Naruto. I told you I had been bullied into training a kid, Naruto sighed. Takenai-san wasn't anywhere near the ninja district, and I can prove it. Hanabi-chan was in the ninja district and she didn't see him, and he was with me most of the morning. He yelled. Ibiki seemed to want to play along with them. So, Hyuga-san, where were you the ninja district? He asked, keeping himself from smirking. Hanabi sighed. I had a few errands that my father asked me to run. I was asked to go to a few weapons stores, and replenish on bandages. I didn't see anyone who looked like him. But you didn't have the Byakugan activated during that time? Ibiki asked. Of course not. Hanabi looked a little surprised. Why would I do that? Because you might have missed him. Since you could have, your information is good, but not enough that I can just release him. Kanomaru moaned and gave Naruto an apologetic look. Naruto was a little surprised that Kano Amaru had come all this way to try to help him. Maybe he had underestimated the little snot. It's good for you that we've already investigated all of his motions this morning. He left the hotel, and was eating in a ramen shop at the time the report said, and since Bunshin don't eat, it's safe to say it wasn't one. Kano Amaru gave a sigh of relief. It's a good thing we were there, he said. Hanabi stared at him. You idiot, didn't you hear what he just said? Your stupid testimony was next to worthless. But he's going to be released. That has nothing to do with you, you idiot. But I was here. Naruto and Hanabi looked at one another. Finally Hanabi spoke. You had nothing to do with this, did you? She asked. Nope, he was like that when I met him. Pity, I was hoping they blame you. Ibiki smirked as he watched. Apparently this was the kind of thing that he saw as entertainment. Naruto never would have guessed that he was into comedy. Kano Amaru glowered at all of them. Just wait, Takenai-san, he said, I wasn't able to do much this time, but I'll save your guts one day. The way Kano Amaru said that reminded him of another 9-year-old from a long time ago. This one had been just a little more stubborn than Kano Amaru and had almost killed himself a number of times. Naruto grinned at Kano Amaru. I bet one day, you'll be better than me, try for it. When Naruto returned it was already dark. One whole day of training was wasted. He sighed and reached for the door, only for it to open and for Sasuke to grab him by the shirt and drag him in, closing the door quickly behind him. Naruto found himself sitting in the center of the room with everyone sitting around him, watching. Even Zabuza was nearby, polishing his sword for what was probably the 17th time. That guy was just weird. Talk or I'll kill you, Sasuke hissed, looking like he very well might do just that. I was kept late because the secretary, Yuki-san, didn't want to fill out the paperwork for my release and give it to Danzu for a signature, Naruto explained. You attracted Danzu's attention. Sasuke almost screamed. I didn't really want to, you know, Naruto deadpanned, and Danzu was told that it was a mistake, thoroughly investigated and cleared up. The report was a slander from an unknown source. Ibiki thinks that it was Sora. Makes sense, Niji agreed. But what about Danzu? Hinata asked, looking worried. He's thinking about you now, isn't he? Naruto groaned a little bit. Yeah, and it got worse. Kano Amuro came and brought a friend, and they wanted to help free me. In the end, they just made things louder and more complicated, but on the bright side, it made everyone want to get rid of me as soon as possible. But Danzu's still thinking about you now, Sakura pointed out. This could be really bad. Naruto knew that she was right, but there was nothing that he could do about it. It wasn't his fault that Sora was a twit and had made Danzu actually have to think about him. He hadn't planned this out, but he supposed that that was the problem with plans. They always started to fall apart under too much pressure. Alright, we've said that we've been friends for a while, but if we say that we don't know where I came from, we can make it look like I'm the only spy in the group, Naruto said thoughtfully, and this is only if we get caught. You all know how to handle torture, and the guy I went to is alright. But don't worry about me, Naruto said, and besides, this is a worst-case scenario. Chances are Danzu doesn't see me as anything more than a genin with a bunshin fixation. I don't even think we're going to need it. I just can't be seen looking suspicious and sneaking around, but if worse comes to worse, make me look like the spy. They can't execute me until after the exams anyways. Danzu has to get all the paperwork done for a trial, even a rigged one. True, Haku nodded, we'll have to make do I guess. If this jeopardizes your life, I'm abandoning the mission, Kimimaro said in a flat voice. Here, was the general agreement. Oh, by the way, Ryu, Naruto looked at Haku, you went looking around the place where we were looking for the preliminaries, right? What did you see? A pair of Uchihas making small talk and dropping tantalizing hints. Haku sighed. The fact that he was using sarcasm showed that he was frustrated. Other than them, I found a room with some cameras where they were recording our battles. It looks like Danzu wants to watch them again to see things better. Other than that, nothing of any real interest. So, Danzu's cautious, Gaara muttered, I hope this doesn't come back and bite all of us. Well, he hasn't done anything, so he might suspect something, but not this, Sai reasoned. Let's hope it stays that way now that Taki's caught too much attention, Sakura sighed. Maybe we should report a bunch of other people and get them in trouble so that Taki's doesn't look like it's anything special. Clever, but too hard to do, Niji pointed out. We'd be the ones who got caught. Should we talk to Gama-sensei or she who must be obeyed? Hinata asked. No, it'll just cause them trouble, Sasuke shook his head. We don't even know if there's a real problem, or we're just being paranoid. I doesn't feel right to just lay low and hope it blows over, Niji muttered. But it seems to be the only thing that we can do, Naruto muttered. He hated to be this helpless. It made him feel like when he was a younger, watching the Sandaime kill, but being able to do nothing about it. Sora had won this round. Check the description for the links to the author.